Alright, in this lesson we're going to talk about the physical geography of Southern Africa. And when we're talking about Southern Africa, there is South Africa, a very southern country. Southern Africa obviously includes a little bit more than that. Very diverse region. The driving question this time is fairly open-ended, but there's going to be a lot of diversity. Some things are probably going to pique your interest. And I just asked the question of, if you could visit one place here, what would you choose? What would you pick? You can kind of see what you're going to be able to need to be doing, just discussing some of the landforms, climate types that exist here in Southern Africa. So, Southern Africa is a big region made up of 14 different countries. You can see it's Angola, Zambia, Malawi, sometimes pronounced Malawi, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, South Africa, Lesotho, Swaziland, that's the one that always gets me because it sounds more like an amusement park than a country, Madagascar, Comoros, Seychelles, I believe is how you pronounce that one. The last two there are islands, so it's Madagascar, and Mauritius. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce that one. Some of these countries are obviously more important than others due to size. Some of these you probably have heard of before, such as Zimbabwe, South Africa, Madagascar. We're going to talk about that here in a second. So, just big area, big region. One of the first things I want to talk about is the Cape of Good Hope, which is at the southern point of Africa. It's located within South Africa. It is believed to be the southernmost tip of the continent of Africa, but I think there's a little bit of a conflict of that. Some people think that it's actually not the most southern tip. But this was really important because it was the southern tip that ships passed around when trying to sail around Africa. So it often became this kind of like key stop, and some of the first people that settled in Southern Africa settled around the Cape of Good Hope. We'll talk about that in the history section in the next lesson. So Madagascar is the fourth largest island in the world. So when we look at a map, you'll see it off to the east of Southern Africa. It's home to a lot of diverse animals that live there. And so I think that's kind of why they made a movie about the animals in Madagascar and just the cartoon of that, just because that is fairly true. So Madagascar is kind of a cool area, being a large island. There's a lot of elevation that exists around here. There's the Great Escarpment. You can kind of see forms like almost like a U-shaped pattern around the southern part of Africa. An escarpment is a steep cliff at the edge of a plateau with low land area below, so it's kind of steep banks. So that's kind of an interesting feature. This is kind of what it looks like. You can kind of see real steep in the plateau. In this top picture up here, this one, let me move to the pointer here, this one right up here. And then we also have desert. So this is the Namib Desert. It's really interesting because it's desert right along the coast, which is something you don't normally find. I think it's often used, it has been used maybe in movies, just because it looks really interesting having ocean right next to desert. So that's the Namib Desert. The Kalahari Desert also is in southern Africa. Maybe you've heard of that before. It's very dry there. And so that's kind of interesting that, it's not all like tropical. The Congo is just north of there. We talked about that in the last unit with Central Africa. So now we're into the Kalahari. The Zambezi River is a major river that runs through this area. It's one of three major rivers. It is the region's longest river at 2,200 miles, and it plunges over Victoria Falls, which is something I always want students to kind of remember. So Victoria Falls is probably one of the most famous landmarks in Africa. It's up there with Kilimanjaro, which is more in Eastern Africa, and probably Victoria Falls is probably one of the top two, I would guess. It's often called the Smoke That Thunders. You can see its indigenous name there. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Why is it called the Smoke That Thunders? It's mist. So you can kind of see it maybe up here in this top picture here, but certainly down here, there's almost always mist that comes up just from the force of the water hitting, falling so far. If you've ever been to Niagara Falls, it's kind of a very similar type of thing. There's always mist that's coming up from Niagara Falls just to the impact of the water hitting there. So that's why it's called the Smoke That Thunders. It's about a mile wide. It's actually the largest waterfall in the world. It's not the tallest waterfall in the world. That is held by one of them in South America, but it is high. It is one of the top ones in the world. So a lot of people come here to see it. You can get really close to it. Maybe show you a few kind of crazy pictures that you can see in class. It looks like people are about ready to fall over the edge. A lot of people take like helicopter tours and fly over it as well. So it's a major tourist attraction in this part of the world, which is great for the economy. This is just a video the BBC made about Victoria Falls. So it's kind of interesting. Some climate zones we'll see. We've already talked about that there was, the mid-desert, the Kalahari, so there's desert regions, there's temperate regions, there's also tropical kind of zones that exist there as well. So a lot of diversity in that. Talking about the desert, there is something called the Skeleton Coast, kind of the coastline that follows the Namib Desert. There's often a lot of fog that comes in. I don't know if fog is usually the result of the change in temperatures. So like here in Indiana, if it's really cool and then it warms up a bunch, we may have some fog, or the other way around. And this is often causes these ships to run aground or to wreck. And there's been this Skeleton Coast is kind of riddled with all these accidents that have happened there, and you can still see some of the ships that from that time. It is rich in natural resources, especially in minerals. It has some of the largest mineral resources in the world. So we're talking about things like platinum, which is used in making jewelry often. Wedding rings are sometimes made out of platinum. Chromium, gold, and diamonds. We'll talk about diamonds here in a second. Also, they have coal, iron ore, uranium, and copper. So lots of resources like that exist. So diamonds. One of the things I want you to know about diamonds is that there's a term sometimes used called blood diamonds. And blood diamonds doesn't have to do with the color of the diamond itself. At this point, you know that diamonds don't have to just be clear. They can be other colors as well. A blood diamond doesn't have to do with that. A blood diamond has to do with diamonds that are mined and then they're sold to basically fund things like wars, rebellions, conflicts of some kind to buy. Wars are expensive, so using those materials to provide weapons and pay soldiers or whatever else they need to do. It's a very kind of frowned upon thing, and the diamond industry has to it's regulated, and so the diamonds cannot be purchased that have come from these areas of conflict, or if they're coming from an area where there's conflict, they have to somehow prove that those diamonds were not, a blood diamond. So that's kind of an interesting component of the diamond industry and how they kind of deal with this, so they're not, funding war basically by buying diamonds that people are demanding. Wildlife, well, we talked about Madagascar, but just even in kind of some of the areas of Zimbabwe, there are people that go and take safaris. So there's wildebeests and lions and zebras and giraffes. So there's lots of animals there. Poaching is also a problem. In East Africa, that's also a problem. Anywhere that there's lots of wildlife, that's basically the illegal killing of animals. Rhinos and elephants are two of the big targets because of their ivory. Ivory used to be used kind of for jewelry, piano keys were made out of ivory at one time. So if you have a piano in your house or you play piano, most of those are no longer, they're probably synthetic. Some of them may be made out of bone if they're an old enough piano. But today you can't buy a piano really with ivory on it as well. It's also used in traditional Chinese medicine. They believe you can make a powder out of it and maybe use it as a tea. So that's, I think, also maybe part of what is used for that. So that's another problem with the poaching that has existed. Soldiers carry guns around and they take it seriously, and you might get arrested if you're trying to kill an animal, or it could be worse. They may have to use physical force. So just kind of an interesting dynamic with poaching. If you go to the Indianapolis Zoo, you go over to elephants, they talk about poaching and just how they're trying to train local people in these African countries to kind of be the ones that protect the animals, and instead of it being outside groups like from the United States doing it. So that kind of wraps up physical geography. So lots of diversity here in southern Africa. A major tourist attraction is definitely Victoria Falls, but then also people coming for to see other things, wildlife in Madagascar and whatnot. Thanks for tuning in. tuning in.